Kirschner wire extension to my leg. As both bones were broken below the knee, the theory was to stretch the leg and try to marry the bones in the correct position. Under an injection of Evapan, a steel bar was shot through my ankle bone to act as an anchor. A steel cable was then attached to the anchor and to a pulley apparatus below the foot of the bed. Weights were added each day to steadily stretch the leg. Otherwise, I was told I would be left with a 2-inch shortening, necessitating the use of a club boot at a later date, which I didn't much care for. But my general and local condition had regressed considerably, and I was at my lowest ebb. I was now wishing that I could see the end of this confounded, useless lump of decaying flesh and bone. On the 19th of November, I got my reluctant wish, and my leg was amputated by Major Peter Smith of the 133rd Parachute Field Ambulance. As I later learned, it was not a moment too soon. Prior to the operation, I had been regarded as a hopeless case, one of those certain of not lasting. After surgery, however, I made such an amazingly quick recovery that I was back to life and sitting out of bed only a week later. The medical orderlies could not do enough for us, from baths to fetching bedpans, carrying patients from the bed to the loo and back again, soothing the dying, or reading a book for those too weak or exhausted to do so for themselves. They were always on call all hours of the day and night. I wondered when they managed to eat or sleep. I asked one who was passing with a bottle in his hand. He answered quite cheerfully, "Oh, we get 40 winks now and then, with a snack in between." So there you go. I mean, almost one sentence. No, 2 sentences. He was wishing that he could get this decaying hunk of flesh off of his body, and the next sentence is he got it amputated. That's how much. That's as matter of fact as you can get, I guess, is where I'm going with this. This is one last little section of this. A Polish para who had dropped at Arnhem was opposite me in the corner of the ward. He had been cut up badly and was having a rough time. A German military clergyman kept calling to say prayers and finally came to administer the last rites. As he stood there in his dark olive green uniform, black jack boots and belt, peaked cap under his arm, I scrutinized his close-cropped bull neck and square jaw. I could not help but notice and thought how strange that he wore a gun holster. A man of the cloth with a pistol in a hospital. What next? So he talks about, the care that he gets. He starts getting moved around a lot. The Germans kept shipping us out as soon as they thought we were fit enough to travel. And once again, I found myself in a truck, this time heading to the rail station at Apeldoorn, where we pulled up alongside and boarded a Red Cross train. And of course, this stuff just never gets easy. Daylight came with a German doing his nut and shouting, "Spitfire, Achtung, Spitfire, Achtung." I watched a lone Spitfire turn and fly parallel to the train at about 100 feet with the same distance from the train. It was quite cheeky, I thought. The pilot was having a real close look to make sure it was a hospital train. I could see clearly his goggles were off and white scarf, and felt like giving him a wave as he disappeared behind some pine trees. We were now in Germany with snow-covered mountains and forests of fir, log cabins dotted here and there, making it all so picturesque. As nightfall came, we halted at a dismal-looking place, a small town, I think. Unfortunately, the luxury was now over, and we were ushered off the train on a collection of crutches of varying lengths that were produced and given to the leg amputees. So they end up in this just junk place. We were all a bit under the weather with the added unpleasantness of an amputation. One lad had an arm and a hand missing, another 2 arms off, and most, like myself, had lost a leg. One poor fellow was the worst for blisters on his one and only foot. We had a wounded medic who was with us and did all he could to help with minimal medical supplies. We had only paper bandages. It was not the best of nights on the cold stone floor, but I somehow slept. Others were not so fortunate. and one chap did not even live to see the rest of the journey, remaining motionless the next morning as we were roused by the guards. So this is transport continues, gets on a train, finally ends up at another place. The snow was quite thick, and we pulled in what looked like a school in a small town near Munster. 3 of the Yanks and myself were told to get out, and then a lorry carried on its way, leaving us standing in the crisp snow. A voice called, "Welcome, buddy, come in." He was a big American from Indiana called Marvin Adams. Inside, he showed us to a room on the left. "Grab yourself a pillow and bed down here." "I'll do yours, bud," he said, looking me up and down. "How'd you manage that, feller?" "Put the best foot forward at the wrong time," I answered. "Ah, well, this ain't the Ritz, but we'll have fun," he said. I wondered what he meant by that. Always good to be that person with a good attitude, even when you're in a damn prisoner of war camp. Mm-hmm. Going on here, the Germans' guards were non-existent except at night. As we were all severely wounded, there was thick snow outside. They were obviously not worried about a mass escape. Food was sparse but regular. And then, again, more moving. I was just getting used to this place when word went round that Jerry was moving us, some of us maybe for repatriation. Having only one pin, meaning leg, I thought I stood a good chance to be in on this. Then early one morning, 3 Yanks, 2 Russians, and myself were ushered to a truck and taken on a passenger train in which we traveled a few miles, only to detrain again, perhaps to get another connection for our as yet to be undisclosed destination. And then they get off that train, they get on another train, they get on this other train. After shunting around a bit and hitching up to another train, we rolled off again. It was dusk, cold, and pretty dismal, all told. Then someone struck up our version of the song, "Bless 'Em All." And their version of the song was, "Sod 'em all, the long and the short and the tall. Sod all the sergeants and the WO1s. Sod all the corporals and their bastard sons. For we're saying goodbye to them all, as back to their billets they crawl. You'll get no promotion this side of the ocean, so cheer up, me lads. Sod 'em all." And he says it seemed we had joined a group of British soldiers. This was by way of an introduction. They finally make it to Bremen. We pulled in slowly, and as the train came to a stop, there were sounds of doors opening and the hustle and bustle of people getting off and making their way along the platform. And then it happened, an air raid warning whined out. Civilian and military personnel immediately began scurrying about, and the military, I noticed, did not hesitate to shove anyone else out of their way. A little shot at the German military. The civilians are getting pushed out of the way so they can get to cover. The air was humming with aircraft. American Boeing B-17 flying fortresses, and our guards quickened their step way ahead of us, periodically turning to beckon us to hurry it up. We entered the shelter, big enough for about 100 people, and after a lot of pushing and shoving settled amid glares and remarks thrown our way. I was happy to let it happen, but somehow I had been pushed and guided into a corner of the shelter away from the door. If a bomb lands too near, the Germans take the blast and cushion any effect on us, I thought. There was a wooden bench fixed to the wall. I dropped to it exhausted. 3 guards had spread out between us and other occupants, and when the bombing started in earnest, the shelter shook. I was sure one had landed close outside because I felt its draft, reminding me of being blown off my feet in North Africa, only that time it was just 50 feet away. Everyone fell silent as the drone of aircraft and whine and crash of bombs went on with ever-increasing ferocity for a good hour before dying down to a steady drumming and an occasional distant explosion. I must admit, I always think of these bombing runs as taking like maybe 10 minutes. But we're talking about a good hour. People began to chatter. This is once everything's kind of faded. People began to chatter as inner fear dispersed and external bravado took over. I could hear the gnashing of teeth. Glances accompanying, finger pointing in our direction. The crowd was getting restive, and a big man started pouring forth with words of abuse. A big Frau, about 40 years old, worked her way nearer to us until she was only a couple feet away. I felt the moisture of her spittle as she argued with the guards about the privilege we had being allowed to be in the same shelter as the German people. I gathered that was the crux of the matter. At this point, a heavy-booted foot came out and started propelling my way. I parried firmly with my right hand, and the boot just brushed my balls, coming to a harmless glancing blow on my left thigh. The guard stood firm, restraining the woman and trying to calm everyone down. It was only then that I noticed a familiar sound in French. Our guards were Frenchmen conscripted in the German army. Anyway, they saved my nuts from being cracked. There must have been another hour's wait at the station, so now they're back going to transfer again. There must have been another hour's wait at the station until an old army-type lorry with solid tires turned up. Oh, sorry, they were waiting for a truck. I couldn't care less at this stage, provided I didn't have to hobble on crutches. Before long, I saw the large POW camp ahead with its 8-foot high wire fences and guards' platforms sticking up like sore thumbs all around. There was a collection of dingy-looking huts dotting the interior. The lorry slowed at the gate, and the senior guard jumped down through the handing over ceremony. Then the big wood and wire gates creaked open, and the lorry jerked into the compound where out we tumbled. I was exhausted and sweating as if I had just come out of a Turkish bath. My stump was throbbing. I stayed lying on the ground where I landed, managing to support myself on one elbow, while the rest of the party sat, knelt, or remained standing with the aid of their crutches. I didn't want a welcoming committee, but wished that someone would show us where to go. One of the guards was busy having a chat and laughed with his mate. Eventually, he gave us the go-ahead, and the party moved off slowly and wearily. I found myself left behind. I tried to get up, but I could not muster enough strength to make it, so I started crawling, dragging the crutches. I had only managed 5 or 6 yards when I heard voices and saw 2 pairs of gated boots. Come on, me old mate," a voice said. "We'll give you a lift." On which they lifted me with ease and carried me I don't know how far. I didn't even get a glimpse of their faces to say thanks. Sinking down onto a straw mattress, I just slept and slept for the next 2 days. When I awoke, I found that I was in Stalag X1B in Saxony, along with a large number of other airborne men. It was not long before I contracted more complaints to add to my already sorry condition. Lice and bugs were in abundance in my hut. The nights were the worst. The iron stove was stoked right up at night, and the heat was awful with all the doors and windows shut tight. Urine buckets would fill to the brim in no time, making the stench nauseous. I went down with dysentery, pleurisy, and scarlet fever, which together with my amputation meant that I did not feel all that good. Reg is hard as nails. If I had wanted to die, I would have. But fortunately, that didn't enter my head. Little key note. As I read that, I thought, let's think about that. If you want to die, if you want to give up, there's the time. But luckily, fortunately for him, that thought did not enter his head. After a short time, promising news. And again, I'm jumping ahead. Like this is, we're talking, every little thing that he just talked about is a nightmare. And he's got them all at the same time. It's been a while since we talked about lice on the podcast.
Yeah.
We've been missing out on that one. We think lice is no big deal because your kid gets it, and then you get some special little medicine from the store, and then you put it in their hair, or you shave their head, and either way, problem solved. Mm-hmm. These guys are got it, and there's no way to get rid of it. This is, by the way, while they've got dysentery and pleurisy and scarlet fever and an amputation. However, fast forward a little bit, after a short time, promising news. I was told that I was going to be repatriated. I boarded yet another train. No sooner did we set off that there was a terrific whoosh, and the train stopped in the middle of nowhere. I could hear the guttural twang of German civilians as they ran hell for leather on each side of the train to take cover from what must have been our own aircraft overhead. One of the guards just vamoosed and left it to us. Looking down to the track, I saw that it was much too high for me to jump with only one leg, though some of our party of 8 jumped and took cover.